he took the asanas from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. And then he also took gymnastics. Idea of gymnastics was popular at that time. So gymnastics, and he amalgamated all this, and he designed something called the Ashtanga Yoga. Problems, different skeletal problems, different body problems. So he started evolving his own techniques to improve that. First of all, he had to improve his health. So he started using props. So he started using things like, whatever he could get, even to sit in a Bhadrakonasana, that is, sit in a particular seating position. He had to use cobblestones, heavy cobblestones on his legs. He would put it to press them down. To press them down. Now, Ashtanga is not just based on the Yoga Sutras that we spoke about last time. It's basically 8 parts of the body touching the floor.
In today's episode, we discuss the evolution of yoga in the 20th century modern world. So stay tuned to know how postural yoga became extremely popular all over the world.
Okay, so we've spoken about how yoga has evolved in the last 6,000 years. Yeah. So now let's talk more about how yoga has changed, or how its origin story in the modern times. You know what I mean?
Yeah, understand what you mean. I mean, of course, we have to flow. Once we last time, I think we ended with the late 19th century.
Yeah,
that's where we ended. Now, the late 19th century, the end of that century, it is Ramakrishna, Paramahansa Ramakrishna is the person that got the yoga philosophy. Somebody who made it experiential, and I think he was also the epitome of Bhakti Yoga. Okay, and his extremely sincere student was Vivekananda. So Vivekananda definitely was there in the late 19th century. He's the one who kind of took over from Paramahansa, Ramakrishna Paramahansa. And he is the one who took it to the Western world, you can say, or to America, to be precise. So he took it to America, but it was still yoga philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
It was still yoga philosophy. So he made it popular. He made the idea of yoga extremely popular there. The idea. So the practice hadn't started as yet. Okay. The idea, the concept of yoga was, because he was a great orator. So he could kind of enthrall an audience, and he had written absolutely stunning books. And so he floored the Americans when he went there. So that was the beginning of, you can say, the exposure of yoga to the Western world. Beginning 20th century is when the evolution of the postural yoga, asana, postural, poses, so postural yoga started. Now there's the intellectual heirs, because Vivekananda did not live for a long time. He was very young. He died, I think, he was merely 40, in his early 40s when he passed. So 1902, if I'm not mistaken, he passed on. So he had 2 intellectual heirs. When I say intellectual, is they were reading about him a lot. They were, understanding and also following him as this great intellectual. So there were 2 of his, that's why I'm calling it intellectual heirs. They might be not direct disciples or students, or they're more like people who have inherited that intellect was one was somebody called Dr. Sivananda Saraswati. Okay, Swami Sivananda Saraswati, and the second person was somebody called T. Krishnamacharya. These were the two. How do I say that? They are the ones who created a revolution as far as the yoga asanas were concerned. Yeah. Now, Shivananda Saraswati, what he did was he took the inspiration from Hatha Yoga. If you remember Hatha Yoga, I had spoken, there was a book written on Hatha Yoga in the 14th century, Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So he took inspiration from that. He also took inspiration from the Yoga Sutras. And what he did was he designed a sequence with just around 12 poses. So any of his classes will have those 12 poses, definitely. 12 asanas. Then he incorporated the Hatha Yoga philosophy, the Yoga Sutra philosophy, and he designed a nice sequence where all these aspects were included. And it was also easy for people to practice that. It was not too complicated. So he designed it so that, and he set up an academy in Rishikesh. So that is where he started. He left Malaysia. He came back to India. He was a doctor there. He came back to India, and he set up a academy in Rishikesh. And he was an extremely influential, generous soul, and he created the euphoria for yoga in the Western world, yoga poses, yoga asanas. So you can say that his style of yoga was, it was the first style of yoga which was like popular in the West. Shivananda Yoga. It is still there. Now, the people who have taken over, there's one offshoot of it is called the Bihar School of Yoga, okay, which is in Bihar, and one of the main branches in Rishikesh. Of course, they are spread all over the world. It became extremely popular. Now, when we talk about the second intellectual, let's park Swami Sivananda for a while. Maybe I'll kind of come back in comparison to him, to what T. Krishnamacharya brought into the system. So now, T. Krishnamacharya, he is also often known as the father of the modern yoga, father of modern yoga. Now, what he did was he took 24 asana, and completely mastered it. Totally mastered the postures. After he mastered the posture, and again he went on and innovated another 3,000 postures. 3,000 postures. He mastered that.
So how many postures are there in?
Last time I told you it was like more than 84,000.
84,000. Wow.
Yeah, but only in Hatha Yoga Pradipika, if I'm not mistaken, it's 84.
Yeah, because when I was Googling, I think that's the answer even I found, that there are 84 asanas. So
yeah, but but if you go back in history, the way I spoke to you about the history evolution, it started from the 8th century. So from 8th century till Hatha Yoga Pradipika was 14th century. So there was so much happening. So there was so much of evolution. There were too many asanas, but 84, they kind of, Hatha Yoga Pradipika brought it back to 84. Yeah. So from there, he kind of mastered 24 asanas. And then again, another 3,000 postures he mastered. Now, initially, his life changed when he, because he was a Sanskrit scholar, he was a well-read person. He was into law. He was a very well qualified Krishnamacharya. See, both of them were very well educated, whether it is Sivananda Saraswati or Krishnamacharya. So he was also extremely well educated. So he got an offer from from Mysore Sanskrit College to be a professor there. So I think the turning point for him was that. So he moved to Mysore and started teaching there. But he was an extreme disciplinarian, old school, tough love person. So even in the Sanskrit college, he was like a bit too harsh on people or too strict on people. And so because of that, he had to move on from that. But the royal family of Mysore, and then Maharaja, he had an affiliation to Krishnamacharya. So he said, okay, so we have this gymnasium where, people practice gym. So why don't you use that and then, kind of explore your options there. So he got that gymnasium there. And that is where he started evolving his postures and writing about it, deeply reading about it. He brought in all the aspects of law, philosophy, yoga sutras, asanas, everything, breathing, everything. So he had become this monster of yogic knowledge. Now, so what he did was he took the asanas from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and then he used the wrestling technique because it was a gymnasium, so there were wrestlers, warriors, because it's a kingdom, there were warriors. So the wrestling was an important aspect of that gymnasium. He took in that, and then he also took gymnastics. Idea of gymnastics was popular at that time. So gymnastics, and he amalgamated all this, and he designed something called the Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga. So he's the one. So today, what people are practicing Ashtanga is his gift to yoga. So the Ashtanga was a sequence of, he created 3 sequences. That is, one was primary sequence, one was intermediate sequence, and one was advanced sequence. So that it can adapt to all kind of group of, people according to their capabilities and their abilities and their body types. But again, he was an extreme taskmaster. He was like very, very strict. He was extremely, how do I say, he was a perfectionist. He was a disciplinarian. So a combination of that old school and extremely highly educated, intellectual. So all this combination made it really tough person to deal with, But his sequences were like, it was a given that, it worked. Yeah. Those things work. But you had to practice. There's no way. There's no shortcut to it. Yeah. You have to be a hardcore practitioner. So luckily for him, he had an extremely devoted disciple called Pattabhi Jois. So this Pattabhi Jois, it's interesting because when he was in Tamil Nadu, Pattabhi Jois also was there when he was very young. So at that time itself, he had started, when he was a young boy, he had started practicing with Krishnamacharya, gentle yoga practices he had practiced. But then this Pattabhi Jois got admission into the Sanskrit school, and he traveled to Mysore. This is before Krishnamacharya traveled to Mysore. So luckily for him, Krishnamacharya also got posted in Mysore.
Meant to be.
So he was absolutely excited about the whole idea. So then he continued his practice with, and he was a very ardent fan, and very, he has not kind of deviated from the main sequence. He's the one actually who's still following. He's not there anymore, but he's the one who actually kind of followed it into the 21st century or into the early 21st century. So what he did was he added a few the Surya Namaskar, okay, as a sequence in between the Ashtanga practice. It was there already with Krishnamacharya, but the Surya Namaskar was added between the postures. It had become an important part of the practice. So that was his addition to it. He didn't deviate anything, he just enhanced that. So the vinyasa was already there. So what is vinyasa? Vinyasa is taking that Surya Namaskar, which was usually designed for warriors. Okay, that Surya Namaskar was something that was designed for the warriors. Now he took that, and that was already there in the sequence of Ashtanga. But what Pattabhi Jois did was like he kind of enhanced it a little bit and created a flow which was much more smoother.
Why did he do that? As in, what was his reason?
Because he was slightly different from, his personality was slightly different from Krishnamacharya. Okay. He also at some point had become a harsh practitioner, but he was still not as tough as his teacher. So he added that and he made it a little bit more softer. Slightly, not much, but he has not deviated too much from it. Even till today, the Mysore school still follows the Ashtanga Vinyasa, which is like extremely popular. So there's no way like, today any yoga that we practice can be disassociated from the Krishnamacharya. There's no way. There's no way, because he's created that magic. And today also, if you're a good practitioner, you enjoy doing that sequence a lot, the vinyasa and the ashtanga. But it's a tough thing. You need to be, if you want to do an advanced practice, then it's years and years of practice. You have to be really strict with yourself. But Pattabhi Jois was his first disciple, who also carried forward his legacy. There was somebody called Xenia Lebensky. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing it right, Lebensky, but it's Xenia. Xenia, I know the first name, who was a great friend of the royal family. She was there and she has seen Krishnamacharya practicing. Okay, so when she said, I want to also learn yoga, this particular. And he was a patriarch. And patriarchs, they said, no, we do not teach women yoga.
How old was Xenia when she wanted to?
She was just very young, early, I think, early 20s, okay, or late.
In her 20s.
Yeah. Yeah, early 20s or late, in a teenage, I think. Yeah, late teens. So she wanted to practice. And she came to him and she said, no, you have to kind of, teach me. There's no way that you can't do this to me. So he said, no. He kept refusing. He said, no, we do not teach women. But she was persistent. But then also she was a good friend of the royal family. So Maharaja requested and ensured that, you have to teach her if you can possibly. So finally he said, okay, he used to make her life miserable to some extent, give her tough sequences and make sure that she, in the thinking that she might, not pursue it. So, but she pursued, she kind of really practiced and she also became. And she's the one who kind of took it. And at that time, she took it to America, to Hollywood. So she was called Indira Devi. So from Xenia Lebensky, she became Indira Devi. So she took it to Hollywood. And that's where all the Hollywood actors of that time were practicing yoga. But what she did was she made it, or even not only she, actually even P. Krishnamacharya helped her sequence it in such a way that it's a bit more softer. It's not, the vinyasa was taken off from it. So it started with standing poses, and then it kind of, was gently kind of went into most of the poses. So there was a slight alteration so that it's easy to impart and easy for women to practice as well.
So that's extremely customizable, yeah?
Customizable. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? That's the beauty of it.
Like from the previous videos as well, it's been customized to each and every time period or issue or gender now, everything. It's quite interesting.
Because he felt that, okay, Indira Devi she was like she hardcore, she practiced it, but everybody might not be able to do that. Okay, so he helped her. She sequenced it herself also, but he helped her sequence it in such a way that it's easy for her to impart it. And she went and she created this absolute craziness in Hollywood. And she lived till, I think, 102, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And she was practicing till in her late 90s. So she was a very well-respected lady. And so that was the beauty of it. That was the second disciple. Pattabhi Jois is the first one. Indira Devi, stroke Xenia Levinsky, how do you want to kind of name her? She was the second person. Now the third person was Nanti Krishnamacharya's wife's brother, his brother-in-law, came to stay with them. Now he was called Iyengar, B.K.S. Iyengar. Now, at the same time, Krishnamacharya's wife, his brother came to live with them. And his name was Iyengar. And he was not very healthy. He was a bit of a sickly teenager. And he had health problems. However, he came to stay with them. And then he wanted to also learn yoga. But Krishnamacharya was not very, very supportive of that, because he said, what will he do? Because he's a sick person. He's usually getting sick. He had a lot of, as growing up, he had a lot of issues like asthma and things like that, which had bothered him. He had got malaria. In those days, malaria didn't have any cure. So he had become a sickly teenager. Now he came to stay with them, and but Krishnamacharya was not very open to it. But one day it happened so that one of his very favorite disciple disappeared on him, and he had an important demonstration to do. And so then Iyengar had to do it. Yeah. So somehow he managed, and though he was not very impressed, but he managed to do it. Now, he was practicing on his own a little bit because he was keen on improving his health. It was not that, he was planning on becoming a teacher or anything. I think merely was kind of working on, improving his health. Now, slowly he had become his disciple as his second, where he could rely on him to a large extent. So he was sent to, I think at that time it was not Karnataka, that closer to Pune, to a club where to teach women, a group of women. So he had to go away from Mysore. And he stayed there. He was far away. There was no phone, no nothing. So whatever he had learned, that was for a year, he was with them. So whatever little bit he had learned from him, with that, he went to Pune. And he started teaching. So there, what happened was there were people coming with different problems, different skeletal problems, different body problems. So he started evolving his own techniques to improve that. First of all, he had to improve his health. So he started using props. So he started using things like, whatever he could get, even to sit in a Bhadrakonasana, that is, sit in a particular seating position. He had to use cobblestones, heavy cobblestones on his legs. He would put it
to press them down.
To press them down.
Okay.
So that is how the whole thing of props started. He's the one who started props. Even he started even using the road rollers, the wheel of the road rollers. So he would, when it is parked, it was parked outside, and it would be outside the club or something. So he noticed that. So what he would do is he would do his upward bow, okay, lying on top of that. He improvised. So he started using props to help people, kind of rectify their problems, small problem. He started in a small way because he had not become an expert. He was still evolving. He was still learning. He was still challenging himself. And every time he used to do something, some other problem, some other physical ailment would be his hindrance. So for him, it was a challenge just to kind of, using yoga to improve his health. And as a result, because of that, he became more of a therapist, yoga therapist. He became more of
happy accident.
Yes, it is a happy accident. So he now could, and started focusing on postural alignment, corrective, postures, where he actually helped. And that became one whole, another level. But his life opened up, his destiny opened up when there was a person called Jiddu Krishnamurti. He was his disciple for some time. And he referred him to somebody called, there was a European pianist called Yehudi. So he came to India. And Iyengar was who went to him and, taught him yoga. So initially he was not open to it, but then after a few interactions with him, Yehudi became a big fan of Iyengar. And that is how his life opened up in Europe and other places. So he started teaching, and then he also was teaching the Queen of Belgium for a long time. So after all that, he had become into a personality of his own, because he had developed and evolved everything. Though he always was grateful to his gurus, to his teacher, but he had evolved his own set of corrective postures. So, but he took him, it all was in 1975. But before that, he got married to somebody called Ramani. So she was extremely supportive as a partner, not only in yoga practice, but also as a life partner. And his yoga institute, when he opened up in Pune, that is in 1975, he named it after her. So it took him 1975. Just imagine, he started his practice somewhere in 1930s.
Yeah, 40 years.
40 years it took him to have his own academy. Mm-hmm. But when he started his academy, even till today, I don't think anyone can beat him to it. Mm-hmm. So I think Iyengar's presence actually put a slight shadow on Saraswati Shivananda's Sivananda Yoga. Slightly, though, but that was very popular. Even I think I still remember I started with Sivananda Yoga because it had it was very accessible. You can start. The theoretical part was good, and there was a parallel growth when you do Sivananda Yoga. And it was very you can start off as a beginner to intermediate. You're comfortable in that. But when it comes to the Ashtanga Vinyasa and Iyengar Yoga, it becomes another level. But as a teacher, I usually like to use the Iyengar Yoga because of the corrective alignment, corrective postures, alignment, and even the Shivananda Yoga. But as a practitioner, if you ask me, like I have to go and do a yoga class, I would love a Vinyasa. Because once you practice, you are okay with most of the postures, then you enjoy doing the vinyasa. Ashtanga vinyasa. Ashtanga, the advanced one is extremely tough, but the beginner, the primary series and the intermediate series are very doable. So we enjoy doing that. But as a teacher, I always prefer to refer to Iyengar, B.K.S. Iyengar, or to Sivananda. So this is basically the modern, when in the 20th century, what we call 20th century, how yoga developed, evolved, and became, even then, I think it was still very basic. What it was being projected into the Western world was still very much, there was a complete polar kind of attitude towards yoga. Either it's philosophy or it's asana. There was nothing in between happening. And in India, we still were thinking that yoga is for people who need to kind of, evolve spiritually, who need to leave their domestic life and go into the mountains. So it was a very weird space where it was still evolving. Things were like moving. It was like behind the curtain, everything was happening. Teachers were evolving their styles, but the Westerners had become more open to it. Because they suddenly found that it was doing amazing things to them physically and mentally, so they adopted to it easily. But in India, the teachers were still struggling. They just couldn't find any ground. So that is the reason, if you see, most of the teachers at that time are all gone to America or Europe or whatever it is. Okay, so these are the main, I would say, Sivananda Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. Now, Ashtanga is not just based on the Yoga Sutras that we spoke about last time. It's basically 8 parts of the body touching the floor. Okay, so that is how the word came in. So literally, it was like 8 parts of your body touching the floor when you do the Ashtanga, like pranam that you do in that pose. Okay, that is how the name came in. Sometimes we confuse it with the 8 limbs of yoga. Okay. Yoga Sutras are there. They do take inspiration from there, but the name actually comes from that particular pose. Okay, so Sivananda Yoga, Ashtanga, then Ashtanga Vinyasa, which is like Vinyasa was added. Okay, then Iyengar. Hatha was there. So Sivananda, actually, all of them have taken inspiration from Hatha. So but only thing is, in the modern world, what has happened is we use Hatha as something which, because you hold it for a little longer. The poses, you hold and then you breathe for a while longer than the other sequences, other asanas. So that is why Hatha became popular, like a bit confusing. But Hatha basically, if you go back to Hatha Pradipika, it is one of the toughest things. It's Hatha means, being rigid, like being very strong. The word Hatha means. Yeah, but that as it evolved now, Hatha Yoga has become much more milder. The word Hatha is used for where you hold and you do the poses. Whereas Ashtanga has become really tough, enough to crack. Definitely, even till today, it's difficult. Vinyasa, the flow part of it. Vinyasa means flow. Flow is easier. And Iyengar, of course, postural correction, extremely alignment was everything, and the use of props. All the props that we see today, wherever we see any use of prop, it has come from Iyengar. Okay. So these are the main, we can say, types or schools. From there, things have, come out. From there, teachers have evolved, finding their own. Even Indira Devi, when she went there, she had another sequence, but she added a little bit of devotion to it, and she started calling it Sai Yoga. She added Bhakti Yoga to it, and she had made it into Sai Yoga in America. The person Xenia Levinsky. Okay, so she had done her version of it. So these were the main 4 types of yoga. Now from there were other yogas which popped up, and according to the teachers who kind of understood it and evolved it and, kind of started teaching in different ways. So would you like to kind of understand that now, or should we keep it for another episode? What do you think?
I think we'll keep it for the next episode.
Yeah, because otherwise it will get too much, like it's too confusing to kind of get everything to know. But let's all be very clear on this. These are the 2 people who have actually created a platform for postural. I'm not talking about any philosophers are there. People behind there have been researching, developing, writing about yoga. There are a lot of people, like, from the Maharashtra belt to Konkan belt and Tamil Nadu, everywhere they've been researching. But the postural yoga that we talk about today has come from these two people. Yeah. So, any questions that you have?
I don't have any questions per se, but I think it's really interesting the way yoga has, especially the bit that you spoke about Iyengar yoga. He made it okay for people who are probably not fit enough to perform or to learn Ashtanga Yoga. He customized it for them. It is so interesting the way it has evolved, and his journey I'm sure he didn't set out in life, to start a yoga school or whatever it was. It was just circumstances in his life that brought him to a position where he could do it. So it's very interesting.
He says it also. In his biography, he says it also. Yeah. Like, everything that I do, I've gone through it.
Yeah.
So he was brutal. Yeah. He was a monster, because I've been to Pune. I was lucky enough when he was still alive. I'd gone to the institute and seen him practicing. So it was like, he's a terror. You go there, nobody would like stand in front of him. Everybody was like, absolutely very, not scared, but, they had that respect for him. Nobody would kind of unnecessarily cross his path. Because he was a tough, everybody was scared to attend his class.
Of course, the determination one needs to have all those ailments and then to start practicing and be successful at it, you require.
Yeah. And I also did a course under one of his direct disciples. So that was and I've seen them, and they are such lovely people. It was a couple, they are now also. A couple, amazing couple, and they follow that to the T. Everything. And you can see the difference when they take the classes, they teach people, like they had the same attitude, but of course not as harsh as maybe B.K.S. Iyengar was, but, they had that attitude, and that would automatically you give them a respect that, they deserve. So yeah, it's good fun. And this is where I would say, from here, then you can expand and you can talk about different yogas that has come out of those things in the late 20th century to early 21st century.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So let's speak about where yoga is today in the next episode.
All right. That would be wonderful. Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you.
So guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Yoga, Body and Mind podcast. If you like what you've just heard, please visit us on our website www.getyogue.com and follow us on all our social media platforms for more content just like this. Please like, subscribe, share and comment any questions that you might have for us. Also, don't forget to turn on the bell icon so you never miss any of our future episodes. Thank you once again and see you next Wednesday.